Look around in Australia's cities and you'll see a skyline that's changing fast. Gone are the days of the quarter-acre dream. High-density apartment living is the new reality.
Over the past 5 years, unit supply has really started to ramp up quite substantially, particularly in markets like, say, Melbourne and Brisbane, where historically we haven't really seen such a densification trend.
The inner city's still pretty strong. Collingwood and Fitzroy are just off the charts.
The numbers don't lie. Apartment construction underway at the end of the June quarter this year reveals the eastern states in overdrive. 55,000 new units being built in New South Wales, 46,000 in Victoria, 31,000 in Queensland. Tens of thousands more have been approved.
That means the pipeline is now probably full. What we're seeing now, though, is all those approvals are moving through to the commencement and the construction phase. So over the next 2 years, we should start to see a lot of these off-the-plan unit sales coming into the settlement period. And that'll be the real test for the apartment market, is how many of those units actually don't proceed through to a settlement.
The skyline full of cranes is a dead giveaway of how good things have become for Australian property developers. Melbourne's Costa Dracopoulos started out with nothing 10 years ago. Now he's rocketed into the BRW Young Rich list with a fortune of at least $60 million. His specialty lately, small buildings with fewer than 60 apartments.
It was a slog, you know, but slowly, mate, we picked up a job here or there, and they went well financially, and it sort of escalated into a multi-million-dollar sort of business, both in the construction and development side. So, and it's still going pretty strong today.
Along with Brisbane, the talk of a bubble in the Melbourne market is constant. Costa Dracopoulos sees the effects on the ground.
You'd go to an auction and it gets floated by little syndicates, you know, maybe 3 accountants or 3 solicitors, yeah, and, you know, they pay, you know, 10% more than the site's worth, and, I mean, good luck to them, they might start it, but we're in the industry of making money in property. That's our bread and butter. They can go back to their accounting jobs and get their, you know, their salaries or however they're set up, but I have competed against a lot of that in the last 3-4 years, which has made it hard to purchase, but they're still out there.
Mr. Doyle, how are you?
Yeah.
Hayden, nice to meet you.
You too.
Thanks for this.
Pleasure.
Yeah,
Ask Melbourne's Lord Mayor about the market and you'll get an enthusiastic tour guide.
Here, just up there is the pant scraper, and that's on the old Suncorp site.
Yep.
And then down here, Rialto here, and then across the road down there, 555 Collins. They were all once completely commercial, and they're now all going to be mixed use. So there's a bit of a changing face in the city. My worry is actually not the number of apartments. It's the way apartments are now starting to crowd out commercial development. I mean, if we go back to the period 2005 to 2010, residential and commercial development about on a par. 2010 to 2015, residential overtakes commercial by 2.5 to 1. And if I look forward the next 5 years, residential outstrips commercial by 4 to 1. Now, that is my worry, that we're generating those jobs, but we're not building the commercial space that's needed to house those jobs. So I think that there will be a correction in the market.
This is why the apartment market in Brisbane and Melbourne is raising red flags. If all projects are built, in the next 2 years, the total number of apartments in Brisbane will increase by a massive 25%. In Melbourne, an increase of 16%. Sydney sits at 13%. There's another reason regulators are worried. The development in Brisbane and Melbourne is mostly concentrated in or close to the CBD. In Sydney, it's more spread out and therefore less of a concern.
Areas like Parramatta, Mascot, Lane Cove, Chatswood are all seeing a fairly rapid rate of densification, whereas in markets like Melbourne and Brisbane and Perth, we are seeing the densification trend is almost exclusively right in the middle of the inner city, the CBDs and the fringing suburbs.
The bigger stuff in the city, the 200 plus stuff, will slow down. I think they want it to slow down a little bit. It's just gone crazy. And not that they've scared the foreign investor, they've just put a handcuff on him.
The handcuffs were applied by the big banks, which have tightened their lending to foreign buyers of new apartments. Sydney estate agent Lulu Pallier sells property to Chinese investors and says off-the-plan apartment launches are not what they used to be.
Basically, you will sell them within a couple of hours. Now it's a bit different. We still have registration for new launches, but it's not like few hours you can sell all of them. It takes a while. There are still people, but it's not as crazy as the last 2 years.
The signs of a slowdown are clear, but is there a risk that the market goes too far in the other direction?
If you look at marketplaces like, say, broader Melbourne or broader Sydney or broader Brisbane, I don't think there will be a collapse in apartment prices. There may be some downwards pressure over the short term, but when you start to drill down into very key specific geographies and look at specific developments, I think that the projects that are probably more risk prone are those that are almost exclusively geared towards investment or more specifically overseas investment. That seems to be where the demand side of the equation is most at risk of falling away. I think if I was buying a unit in any of the housing markets around Australia, I'd be focusing on trying to make sure I differentiated the stock that I was buying into. So trying to buy into stock that was more owner-occupied rather than investment-driven, that was on an A-grade site, and also had the track history of a quality developer and a quality development.
On the changing streets of Melbourne, the city's Lord Mayor rejects talk of a collapse and is vowing to make the inner-city apartment boom work.
We do not want to go back to the days of the John Brack painting, Collins Street, 5 o'clock, with grey and green-faced businessmen fleeing the city because all the life was out in the suburbs. There are some other cities in Australia that do have that problem.